Hi, my name is Khart, and welcome to the first video of the series, which I will be calling the Pong clone development. I guess this video is really aimed for those who are fresh off the boat learning C++ programming language, and it is highly suggested that those that are fresh off the boat learn something very simple such as Pong. Why learn Pong though, you might be wondering? Well, Pong is just one of the games that features the very basic foundations of what all games feature. Pong features things like 2D rendering, movements, collisions, and basically everything else that it really has to deal with, I guess, basic gaming. So in order for you guys to understand what goes into the development, you're going to be having to program those aspects and continuously thinking about what goes into these functions and how many of these function, how many of these objects, as I will mention later, interact with each other and how they interact in order to make applications such as Pong. So for this video, for this entire tutorial, you should be a little familiar with C++ language all the way up to knowing the basics of class object-oriented programming. Know what a class is, know what inheritance is, know a little bit of what polymorphism is, and learn anything about inheritance because we will be dealing a little bit with inheritance today, especially for this particular video. So the first thing I want to talk about is project management. When we're building a video game, regardless of what game it is, whatever application it even might be, it doesn't even have to be a video game, you're going to have to be able to be organized. When you're organized, you're optimizing your ability to locate information or pieces of code that is spread throughout this entire application. If you put everything into one file, you're basically cutting yourself a long piece of crap that you don't want to have to be going through later. That's like, let's say, if everybody dumps their trash and recycling into one trash, and someone else needs to be able to find something later, let's say a plastic cup, but you decided to go ahead and put that in a trash can. Now that person has to look through the entire trash can and look for the plastic cup, when he or she could have just looked through the recycling bin and found it much easier. I know it's probably a bad example, but hopefully that kind of facilitates your understanding of what project management does and how it is important and relevant in order for game development. So for game development specifically, you're going to have to be familiar with how you're going to split up your coding. Usually, and the most, I guess, common and most easiest way to do it is to split all your header files from your source files. So, for object-oriented games such as I will be using today, I'm going to be putting all of my classes into their own header files, and it will be, I guess, separate from the other class header files. So I guess let's get straight into Pong, shall we? So the first thing I really want to show you is this. It might not be much right now. All you can really see is, 6 squares? But these 6 squares are pretty important, and I'll understand why. Each one of these squares represents a certain class that we'll be using within the entire application. The first one is called Game, and we'll be using this game class to run our main game loop, and it's going to also feature a lot of other things which we'll talk about later. But basically, the game is the heart of the application. Without game, your application wouldn't be running. It would go from execution all the way to its closing in less than a second, and you don't really want that. You want your user to be able to play your game for a long amount of time, right? So that's why we created the game class. It will be implementing those kind of features. Another class that I will be using here is the Draw Engine class. And the Draw Engine is specifically for Pong, just going to be able to draw 2D images to the screen, and that's basically about it. With the Draw Engine, we'll be using functionality that is coming from other libraries in order to blend our images to the screen. For this application in particular, we're going to be using the library of SDL because I found it to be one of the more easier ones. You could also go with SFML, but I've find SDL to be a little simpler for me, and some might argue that SML is very much more object-oriented, which it probably is, but I'm not that too familiar with SFML, and I'm more comfortable using SDL, and SDL I believe is more commonly used in game development than SFML. So, with the draw engine, another class that you're going to be using is the sprite class. If you do not know what a sprite is, you probably haven't been gaming that long. Sprite is basically just a 2D image that is featured on the screen. It is what the human eye can see on the screen, such as backgrounds, a player's, like, I guess, token that you can see. So if you saw, like, Mario running around on the screen, that would be his sprite. If you see, like, trees, any scenery, that would also be a 2D sprite. Another class that we're going to be using here is the vector class. Vector is very peculiar in this one, because you can use or implement vector in many ways. You can use vectors as data structures. You can probably use them as enumerations. But for this one in particular, I'm going to set vector as its own class, and I'm going to use vector as a component of sprite, and component in sprite, in order for sprite to have its own vector, if that makes sense. And I'll explain more about how that's actually done as we continue this tutorial. So, another class that I will be doing is the Pong class, or I should probably say paddle class. That's probably more easier to say. So with the paddle class, it's going to have the functionality that is more particular to paddle itself. Paddle is a sprite, I guess, in a sense, for a Pong clone game. And in other games, paddle might actually have a component of sprite within the paddle class. But for this game in particular, I'm going to be inheriting sprite. I'm going to be inheriting from the sprite class to the child class of paddle. And I'll be doing the same thing for this one over here, which is the ball class. Ball class is going to have the functionalities that's only particular to the ball itself, as far as like moving. Paddle won't be moving across the screen like a ball would, so only ball will have that functionality. And finally, the last class I'm going to feature here is the timer class. Anything that's going to be dealing with timing here, I'm going to be featuring into the timer class, and it's going to basically keep track of its own time. I can basically manipulate it in order to start the timer, stop the timer, run multiple timers at once, be able to tell me how much time has been accumulated within a certain timer, and just a lot of stuff that you can do with timer. And I found it to be pretty important, especially when it comes to vectors. But probably for this application, I won't be using timer and vectors directly that much, or probably at all. And I also want to include some arrows over here so it makes more sense about what I'm doing. So, as I said before, the sprite class is going to be relating to two different classes. Ball and paddle class will be inherited from sprite. And this is basically it. This is project management of Pong. So I guess my next video will then feature first the game class and how we'll be able to run our game. I'm going to feature the implementation of SDL, how to execute SDL. So if you're not that familiar with SDL, the first thing I would probably suggest is for you guys to go read SDL documentation or look at some online or website SDL tutorials. The one that I particularly love to use is LazyFoo's tutorial. I found that to be the most in-depth, and it actually provides source code for you guys to use. There's other people out there who also explains SDL in great detail and in a fun way. Check out Lucika Mage's SDL tutorials, as those are very fun to watch, and she also includes a little bit of her own spin of 2D games, which I found to be pretty entertaining. So, with that said, thank you for watching our first video tutorial. Now I guess we'll begin the second one off with the actual coding of the game. Excited!